Welcome all. My name is Brent Smith, and I'm the Common Constitutionalist. And welcome to my Common Constitutionalist weekly podcast. And maybe it's the Super Bowl edition, since I've got my official NFL Tom Brady game jersey on. I guess it's not his. I'm not the one that actually stole his game jersey, and this ain't it. But this is one of his jerseys. At any rate, and that's to support the Patriots in the Super Bowl. But I'm not going to be talking about the Super Bowl today. These are my notes, as I usually have. And I'm going to be talking about the Trump economy, job growth, well, not job growth, but growth in GDP, all the fun topics that you love to hear about, all the, not too many numbers, a few percentages, some boring stuff that I'll try to make at least a little bit interesting, but it needs to be said. And that's what we're going to be doing today. And maybe a little Patriot stuff on the tail end. We'll see. Today on the Common Constitutionalist. How's the Trump economy doing anyway? Well, I guess we'll find out. At least here's one indicator. And this, as sometimes I do, I forgot to write down the attribution. I think this might have been from Zero Hedge. Reading over it, it sounds like something that they would write. So let's just say the attribution is Zero Hedge. I don't know. Might be IBD, but I don't think so. I think it's Zero Hedge. Anyway, they begin with the Bureau of Economic Analysis announcement that the GDP growth for Q4 2017 was just 2.6%, and an annual rate last year was 2.3%. Came out as something of a disappointment since economists have been expecting a higher number. Only 2.6%. Really? After the last 8 years of 1.0% or maybe even negative growth, we're going to complain about a paltry 2.6%? Are you kidding me? But at any rate, that's what experts say at the Bureau of Economic Analyses. So the Washington Post harumphed that GDP growth for 2017 was, quote, better than the year before, but far short of what Trump is promising. Officials had focused on 3% GDP growth as proof his economic policies were working, and Trump has said it could go far above that target, unquote. Glowing report from the Washington Post, as they always do for Trump. Hooray for the Post. And they write, and this is why I think it was Zero Hedge, because of just the way they write. Sorry, but the Post and anyone else making such claim is just flat wrong. When Trump released his budget earlier in the year, it included, as every president's budgets do, a forecast for GDP growth for the year. What did Trump's economists say GDP growth for 2017 would be? Well, they said it would be 2.3%, which is exactly what it was. Is this unusual? Perhaps White House economists routinely get GDP growth for the year more or less right. After all, they're highly trained, and they're only trying to make a prediction about the next 12 months. And I put some notes in here and wrote them down, so I didn't forget to say what I wanted to say. But it turns out that there was not a single year, and this is absolutely correct, there's not a single year when the Obama economists' forecasts held up to scrutiny. Not a one. And why would they? If they've got like fake economists out there writing for the New York Times like Paul Krugman, who's been literally wrong about everything, maybe since birth, what would you expect of the Obama economists? They always aimed high, and then the big splash would come out. The mainstream media would say that there was X growth. A whopping 1.8% growth or some such nonsense, but they'd make a big deal about it. And then 2 or 3 weeks later, on page 87 or something like that, in the bottom left corner, they'd make a correction that no, it was corrected down by the government and the GDP growth was actually negative or 1 point nothing or something like that. You never heard about that from the mainstream media, but every misstep in the Trump economy is going to be reported ad nauseum, and that's just the way it's going to be. We just have to live with that reality. So what does it say about Obama's economists that they were always too optimistic about the impact of his tax and spend regulate policies, while Trump's economy got growth right and may even have lowballed it, and he did lowball it because the 2018 GDP growth numbers, when they finally do come out and they're corrected, they're going to be whatever they predict, they'll be corrected upwards because everybody's already feeling it. As of last Thursday, people's paychecks started growing. Tax cuts are coming in. The corporate America has been unbelievable about the tax cuts with bonuses and pay raises and stock options and all sorts of stuff. That will be felt in 2018, and it's going to be huge. So keep in mind that the latest Q4 number is just an advance estimate that, if anything, is likely to get revised upward, which is what I said, as the Commerce Department collects more data. One could argue that Obama didn't get all his policies enacted, they write, and that affected economic growth, but neither did Trump. No president ever does. And that is absolutely true. And if the big O, Obama, had gotten all that he wanted over the past 8 years or whatever, we'd be Venezuela by now. That's how pathetic it would be. We'd have negative growth every single year. We'd have people leaving America to go to Venezuela to see if they could prosper. That's how. I mean, I may be embellishing slightly, but not a hell of a lot, to tell you the truth, if Obama had gotten everything that he wanted. Yeesh. However, they write, Trump's blah, 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 blah. However, they write, Trump's pro-growth agenda did spark an incredible jump in economic and business optimism, and that's a key thing, too. It's not just the bottom line numbers. It's the optimism of the people and businesses of what they're willing to stick their necks out for in lieu of a return later. And if they think that that the government is actually turning business friendly, that America is actually turning business friendly for reals, yo, there's a little street lingo there for you. Yeah, baby. They're going to become more entrepreneurial. They're going to take more risks. That's just my opinion, but it's right. The idea that this sharp change in direction had no impact on the business climate is foolish, and I absolutely 100% agree. In any case, last year's result should make Trump's forecast for the future more credible, not less credible. Not that they are wildly optimistic. In this last budget year, Trump pegged GDP growth in 2018 as just 2.7%, followed by 2.9 in 2019 and 3 in 2020. These are lowball numbers. They will be eclipsed. I can mark it down right here, right now. These are lowballs, and they will be eclipsed. They'll be corrected upwards. Guarantee you. Trump will know about the blah, 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 blibby, blue, blobby. Trump will no doubt update these forecasts when this new budget comes out in the next month or so. But before anyone dismisses Trump's economic outlook as unrealistic, remember who has a better track record so far when it comes to making such predictions. Yes, that is absolutely correct. So we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back, and I will resume this fabulous, wildly fun topic of finance and GDP growth. and we'll be getting into interest rates, and it's going to be great. Everybody's going to love it. Be right back. You're watching the Common Constitutionalist video podcast.
Yeah, baby! Yeah.
All right, welcome back. Now, before the break, we were talking about gross domestic product. That would be G, a D, and a P, growth. And how Obama's numbers always were optimistic to make it look better, and then they would slide in on the last page of the newspaper or the website a correction about 2 or 3 weeks, maybe a month later, downgrading the GDP growth number. And in Trump's case, it will end up being the opposite, that they'll lowball the number and then it'll be eclipsed every time. And frankly, that's great marketing too, to be honest with you. So I had some thoughts, and since I'm a generous guy, I'll share them with you. After all, it wouldn't be fair to keep all this brilliance to myself. I mean, really, come on. Yeah, baby. So here lies the problem with this whole growth thing. It's growth, business growth, individual wealth growth, GDP growth versus the Federal Reserve. There's a battle that will be waged in America between growth and the Federal Reserve. Interest rates during the entire Obama era were kept artificially low for the entire time to mask how disastrous his economy actually was. And it was an absolute flippin' disaster. None of what he did helped, and it wasn't meant to help. The stimulus, the porculus, the son of porculus, the grandfather of stimulus, and the grandson's second cousin twice removed friend of porculus, none of the stuff worked because it wasn't designed to work to stimulate the economy. It was designed to stimulate the pockets of the unions and the backers of Obama and the crony corporatists. That's who it was designed to stimulate, and it did a whopping bang-up job, as we saw with all the solar companies that got gazillions of dollars and went belly up anyway because they just couldn't survive. But anyway, it's also why, if you notice that during the Obama era, the stock market kept going up too. Now it's going up at a greater clip, quicker during the Trump era, and it's more tied to business. The Obama era stock market was tied to nothingness. It was just tied to the Federal Reserve's policies of artificially holding interest rates at or near zero. That's what it was. The prime interest rate, Janet Yellen and her predecessor Bernanke, yeah, that's who it was, kept interest rates artificially low to prop up the Obama economy, because if they started raising interest rates during Obama's years, the stock market would have crashed. I mean, you can't believe it would have crashed, the percentage that it would have gone down. Business would have suffered everything. It would have just been a cascade of disaster, one thing after another, because that's how weak the Obama economy was. And so Bernanke and Yellen came in and rescued them by holding down interest rates, and then every once in a while they would come out and say, the economy's doing really good and the jobs are coming back and everything. Maybe we'll raise the interest rate by 1/4 of a point or 1/2 a point. Not now, but maybe in 6 months. And of course, they never did it because they couldn't do it, because it would have ruined the shell of the Obama economy, or the mask of the Obama economy would have been forced to come off. That's just the way it is. So that's where like I said, that's where the war has been waged and will be waged, of growth versus the Fed. But now real growth is occurring, and it's happening fast, and it's happening too fast for those rubes over at the Fed. They don't know what to do with it. The only thing they can do, the only quiver they've got in their bag, is to raise interest rates. And this will cause, the GDP growth is going to cause a natural rise in inflation. That's the way it always works. And then the Fed can't have inflation, so they'll have to raise interest rates. And now that there are Republicans in office, they don't feel so bad about raising interest rates. So they'll start cracking up the interest rates. And the direct results of the interest rates being jacked up is the tightening of the money supply, and then the concurrent drop in the stock market, because the easy money days will be gone. The zero interest rate, the diddly squat interest rates will be fading fast. As interest rates rise, money will get tighter, inflation will go up, so on and so forth, and so they're going to have to raise interest rates, but it's safe to do so now that a Democrat isn't in office. That's the way it works politically. Sorry, but the Fed's as political as the rest of them. So just look at what happened on just this past Friday. The threat of an interest rate hike. They didn't hike interest rates, but just the threat of a real interest rate hike. And people believe Yellen now. Back before, she would threaten or not threaten, but say that we were going to raise interest rates in the near future, and the stock market would just keep going up. There would be no blip, there would be no down, there would be no nothing. And if it was a blip, it was just a instantaneous, and then that was it, because they knew she wasn't serious about it. But so now we get the indication of real interest rate hikes, and they will happen. And you get a 665-point drop in the Dow in a day. Now, granted, people panic over, you watch the news, you watch CNN or MSNBC or even CNBC Money. I don't understand why these people are panicking other than it's good news, it's good press. If it bleeds, it leads, bad news sells, that type of nonsense. But it's not nearly as bad as you think, because professionals don't look at it as a 665-point drop, and the Dow is still above 25,000. So it's not nearly as big as if it dropped 665 points and the Dow is at 15 or 10,000. Professionals don't look at that aggrandized number of 665 points. They look at the percentage drop only. How much did it drop? Did it drop 1%? Did it drop a disastrous 10%, which is way down? And that's, if you get a one-day drop of 10%, more times than not, even trading will stop. Everything just screeches to a halt. It's like in It's a Wonderful Life, where the bank just shuts their doors and says, you can't have your money back. We're just cutting you off at the knees, and we'll reopen in a few days when everybody has a chance to calm down a little bit. But when panic sets in, that's what happens. But it was nowhere near that, because, like I said, if you divide 665 points into 25,000, it only ends up being a 2.5% drop, and that's not a big one-day deal. Okay, it may look like it because, it's a 665 points, but it's not when you take into account that the Dow is over 25,000. Like I said, if it was at 10,000, that's a different story. If it was at 10,000 and it dropped 65 points, it would be over a 6.5-point drop. That's a little more substantial, don't you think? So we need to look at, for the next week or so, whether we get a quick bounce, if it bounces back and gets back above 26,000 or close to it, or whether we see further weakening. We don't know, but that remains to be seen. I don't know what the futures are next week, but that's just a short-term. Right now, it's just an instantaneous short-term blip, and to be honest with you, there's nothing to get excited about. So we're going to take another quick break, and I'll be right back with some more fun financial news. See you. Okie dokie. Welcome back to this fun-filled podcast regarding finance. This is absurd, but like I said, it needs to be said, and these things need to be reasoned out, because the passions of the people can overcome reason and logic, and we don't need that to happen. We need to prevent that from happening, and you inject a little reason, you inject a little logic into the conversation, you explain what it all means, and it's not quite as scary once people understand what it all means. But the problem is we can't expect people, the average Joe, to understand the concept of a drop in percentage rather than that big 665 number that everybody's publishing, but nobody's talking about the small percentage drop in the Dow, because of the Dow being so high relative to its position several years ago. This is the same reason why people who like the flat tax, we can't get any traction with the people, because people don't even understand why a flat tax is fair. They only see that a multimillionaire will be paying Joe Average only sees that a multimillionaire, hey, that multimillionaire is going to be paying the same rate as me. That's not fair, because the tax rate is identical. And they're not seeing that 15 or 20% flat tax, a 15 or 20% of a million is a darn sight more than 15 or 20% of 50,000. Okay, so you extrapolate that number out and you say, yeah, he's paying 15 or 20%. It's the same tax rate as you, but he's paying a crap more taxes than you'll ever pay, probably in your lifetime. And a lot of people, you give about 20% flat tax for a multi-gazillionaire, and everybody has to pay that flat tax. It's not an income tax. It's like whatever. It doesn't matter. Oh, you know what? We're not even going to get into that. Just know that it's a whole lot more than the guy that's making 40 or 50 grand. So what happened Friday? Was it Armageddon? Well, it wasn't hardly Armageddon at all, to be honest with you. And this is from IBD. The stock market had its sharpest drop in 7 years on Friday amidst fears that the Federal Reserve may aggressively force the economy to cool down again via interest rate hikes. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell by more than 660 points by the time it closed on Friday afternoon. It was 665 point something, whatever. This fall marked the stock market's worst week in 2 years by number. All right? The last time, now listen to this. The last time, and I love IBD, but I'll be honest with you, they didn't even explain this properly, in my opinion. And far be it from me to question IBD as far as financial and the stock market. Those dudes are the guru's guru. At any rate, this fall marked the stock market's, this fall marked the stock market's worst week in 2 years. The last time the index shed this many points in a single day was on August 8th, 2011. That time it happened because the Standard & Poor, and I remember this, Standard & Poor downgraded the United States debt from sterling AAA credit rating over partisan brinkmanship. But this is what I mean between the two. They're not talking about percentages. They're talking about the greatest point drop in a single day since 2011. Who cares about the point drop if you don't know what the points represent, the percentage that the points represent? On August 8th, 2011, the date that they're talking about was the last great point drop. The Dow sank 635 points, but the Dow began at under 11,500. And now that's a significant percentage drop from 11,500. 635 to 11,500 is huge, a percentage drop. It's like 3 times the percentage drop as the 665 from over 25,000. And this is what we need to explain to the common man, so to speak. And I, being the common constitutionalist and being a common man, can do so. Ha! I don't know. Wage increase is good news for workers, they write, but can also be a sign that inflation may be coming. Of course it can, because as the economy heats up, inflation will naturally take hold. It's a natural process in the financial world. And so you have to do something if you care about holding inflation down, and that the Fed hates inflation. So they're going to raise interest rates on everybody to curb that inflation, to knock the inflation back down again. So they say that people started selling because they were worried that the Federal Reserve might raise interest rates 4 times this year to combat potential inflation. Yet the central bank originally predicted that the Fed would only have to raise it 3 times this year. So people really panicked when they found out that the Feds were going to raise the rate an additional 1 time, or probably once a quarter. And maybe it's a quarter point or a half point, but it makes a big difference. That decision would come if the Federal Reserve decided to act rashly to cool down the economy, because it is bearing up as much more quickly than investors expected. That's true. I don't know of anybody, probably including Trump, that expected the economy to come soaring back this fast. And it is. And even I've seen some of the man on the street interviews. of people. And as of February 2nd, people were seeing a little bit more in their paycheck. One girl said, yeah, it's only 4%, but if it's positive, it's a good thing. She was a Dem. Yay. That's what I was saying. I wrote about this or podcasted or something a couple weeks ago, that I don't think that because of this, people vote their pocketbooks, folks. They vote their pocketbooks. If the greenbacks are rolling in and they can buy that flat screen TV and they can they can finance a new car or a truck, or they can do any number of things, vacation or something that they didn't think that they could do because they have the optimism. They don't necessarily have the money in the bank yet, but they've got that optimistic view that the money's going to start rolling in and I can depend on the government not pulling the rug out from under me. Then the economy starts heating up, and that's when the feds spaz out. So another thing it does is that as the economy heats up, interest rates go up to fight inflation. And the problem is that it also drives up consumer credit card interest rates, which are invariably tied to the rate hikes, to the Federal Reserve rate hikes. Credit cards are tied directly to the prime interest rate index. And so when the Fed comes up and says we're going to raise the point, we're going to raise a half a point, your next bill, within one or two bill cycles, you're going to end up having to pay more per month because of that interest rate hike, because it's tied, the credit card interest rate is tied directly to the prime rate, and when the prime rate goes up, the credit card goes up, the credit card rate goes up. So you may start at 15%, and before you know it, it's 15.5, and then it's 16, and then it's 17, and the sky's the limit, depending on how well the economy does. And so when Yellen jacks up their rate, your rate's going to go up. And that's the credit card companies love this because they don't have to do anything extra. There's no marketing involved in this. They don't have to go out and say, use our credit card. The balance that you've already incurred will be subject to this higher interest rate, so they just make more money. So we're going to take one more quick break, and we'll tie this baby up with my my financial tip of the day, because I'm such a financial genius. Yay. At least I get some of this stuff. Whatever. We'll be right back. All right, so welcome back. Again, I'm Brent Smith. I'm the Common Constitutionalist, working for the common man. As Bill O'Reilly says, I'm working for the folks, baby. Yeah, baby. So O'Reilly has his, when he goes on Glenn Beck, he's on there, on the Glenn Beck radio show. He does a segment with Glenn because they're really good friends. Every Tuesday and every Friday, and every day he comes on, he has a word of the day. That's the word of the day for the folks. The folks. Sheesh. So mine is going to be probably just this time around, because this is my only financial tip for you. Whatever. This will be my financial tip of the day. So my suggestion to all those out there that have a decent amount of credit card debt, and I don't mean you got 40 grand worth of credit card. If you got 40 grand worth of credit card debt and you're not making big bucks, you're in trouble, bro. You better do something a little more drastic than just this. But say you got $4,000 or $5,000 worth of credit card debt or something like that, and you got 2 or 3 cards, and they all have different interest rates. And like I said before the break, as the prime rate goes up, your interest rate will go up, which means that you're going to owe more money every month to each credit card. That's just the way it's going to work. Welcome to America. You're the one that used the credit card for good or ill, and so you're going to have to pay the piper. And so what I suggest you do is you go to your local bank and get an unsecured personal loan to pay off the credit cards. That's what you do. Personal loans, unlike credit cards, almost always carry a fixed interest rate. So no matter what are you yelling about, no matter what Janet Yellen does or says or whatever, it won't affect your fixed interest rate. If you pay 15% fixed rate, that's what you're going to pay. It's the same as your home mortgage. unless you have a variable rate mortgage, and then you're a moron. So that's the great thing about personal unsecured personal loans. And if it's not too much money, any schlub can go into your bank and get a personal loan, a debt consolidation loan, and do it through a local bank. Don't do it through these shysters on the internet or the TV ads at 2:00 in the morning that says that you can get rid of all your debt and whatever. Just go to your local bank, present them with your offer, and more often than not, if your credit's at least decent, then you'll get the loan. If it's not $50,000 worth of credit card debt, if it's $4 or $5 grand, sure, they'll go for it. And even at say you get a 10% fixed rate, you can save all that hassle. You pay off your credit cards, and you save all that hassle of worrying about, is the prime rate going to go up? Am I going to go? If you're scratching by, you're getting by okay, but not much more than okay, maybe you can't afford the variable rate credit card interest rates that they offer that are tied to the prime rate, that you're at the mercy of the Federal Reserve at this point. If you jump out of that and you get an unsecured fixed personal loan for debt consolidation, and what the bank will do is you give them all your credit card information and whatnot, and then they pay directly to the credit card. They don't just give you $4 or $5 grand and say, here, knock you out, we trust you. No, if you want to do that, you go see a bookie, or you go see Guido, the loan show. Hey, you got 10 days to pay me back. And it'll be 50,000% interest every day, compounded. And then Rocky will come break your legs if you don't pay me in 10 days. You don't do that, okay? That's just foolish. You go see your bank and you do that, and you get a fixed rate personal loan. You pay off they pay your credit cards off, and then you just pay that monthly fee every month. And sometimes they'll do an automatic. Well, maybe they'll give you a break on your interest rate if you agree to an automatic withdrawal from your bank account. Something, I don't know, but these people, local banks, are more reasonable than the big behemoths and the internet and all the other nonsense. So you go in there as human to human, and you speak to them, and that's what you do. But the average credit card interest rate is over 16%, I think. I looked it up a while ago, and I think it's probably about the same. It's 16.15 or something like that percent. And there are a lot of cards that are a whole lot higher than that if you check the interest rate on your credit cards. And they're not going to be going down, and they're not even going to be staying the same. The minute that Yellen jacks up the rate, regardless of what it is, your rate's going up, your payment's going up. It's that simple. So that's what you do. But in some banks, if I'm not mistaken, depending on your situation, some banks will, and I can't believe I'm doing this. It's like a finance show or something on Saturday morning on the FM or AM radio or something. But at any rate, some banks, depending on your situation, will pay off your credit cards, and then they'll close the accounts for you. You won't have a choice. If you want to take the bank's money, you got to live by their rules. If your credit's good and they look at your payment histories and things like that, then they'll just say, we're going to pay off your credit cards, and they'll give you the option maybe of, cancel that card and keep this one just for emergency or whatever. But again, you go to a local bank, you speak to human, and you give them your deal. That's what you do. Fixed rate, variable rate, yay for fixed rates. But this also, again, if they allow you to keep your credit cards and then they pay them off, now they're zero. So you got these credit cards in your pockets. This assumes that if you don't already, you can develop a skill called a discipline, okay? And not just run your dang cards up again. So that's all I've got for today as far as the Common Constitutionalist financial segment. But this is an interesting topic. Yeah, of course, it's a little boring and it's a little dry. And if you don't like finance, you probably would have turned this thing off 15 minutes ago. But this is fascinating, and it's something that everybody needs to at least have a handle on. They don't need to know the ins and outs of the GDP growth and all this other crap that I went over. But you need to have a handle on at least what happens. If X happens, then Y happens. If X happens, then it's gonna directly impact Y and then Z, and you need to know this kind of stuff. And just as a citizen, it's handy and smart to know this kind of stuff. And then when the blank hits the fan, you'll have a better understanding of A, why, and then what you might be able to do about it. So that's about all I've got this weekend. You guys have a blessed weekend. If you're an Eagles fan, on you. If you're a Patriots fan, hooray for you. I'm cautiously optimistic, although unfortunately up here in New England, I've heard this jive before, jive turkey, where a lot of people, because of Nick Foles as a backup quarterback, they don't think he's got the chops to beat the Patriots, and the Patriots are going to put up points, and they don't think Nick Foles can do it, despite the fact what he did with to the number 2 ranked defense of the Minnesota Vikings or whatever they were. He shredded the crap out of those guys, and they just folded like a tent. That scares me, because I've heard this jibe before when we were 16-0, and all we had to do was show up at the field. I don't know where it was, Houston or Miami or wherever the crap. The Giants beat us, so we couldn't go 18-0. I remember that succinctly, specifically, that all we had to do was just show up, and then the Giants would wither and die. And they beat the crap out of us. They just flat out beat us. We didn't beat ourselves. They beat us. And Eli was good, and their defense was lights out, and they kicked our booties all over the field, and we deserved to lose because we were frickin' arrogant. And I hope that doesn't happen again. I don't think it's going to. I think we learned our lesson since then. At least the last Giants loss. Oy vey. This is it. I'm out. See ya. Good game. Have fun. Drive safe if you're traveling to somebody's house like I am. And that's it.